Hi again, everybody. My name is Kim Martin. I am a new member to Sidebar, but perhaps one of the most excited members to Sidebar so far. And it is a pleasure to introduce you to Chris, who is an ex-Amazon recruiter. He is an inside person who has now decided to expand his knowledge and his insights to help all of us out there, specifically tech recruiters, or excuse me, specifically tech executives and leaders out in the industry. I know, Chris, you're going to add and expand onto your bio and your introduction. Talk to us a little bit more about the industries that you focus on and a bit more specifics. I just want to say I'm a personal fan of Chris. I've been following him on LinkedIn now for quite some time, and I would just say that at the very least, anything that Chris advises or provides to us, you could, wherever you are in your job search journey, you could immediately apply. So, Chris, do you want to add on?
Thank you so much, Kim. I appreciate it, and thank you for the introduction. I'm not going to talk too much about myself, but as Kim mentioned, I'm former executive Amazon recruiter, and now I sit on the other side of the table, basically helping the individual job seekers as a coach when it comes down to like reworking your resume, your LinkedIn profile, how to position yourself, and how to kind of navigate the interviews and the whole job search process. So I was very excited when Kim invited me for this, particular session because I always think it's good, to kind of bust a couple of these myths around the resume and the LinkedIn, etc., and what actually works and what you need to keep in mind. So for the majority part of my session or kind of the workshop as well, I'll be sharing my screen and trying to show you what the back end of the process looks like and kind of give you the tips on like, hey, here's how you should position yourself to actually pass these screenings and all of that stuff. And then I'll try to keep 20 minutes at the end for any questions. I'll be pausing in between slides a couple of times just to see if there's any relevant questions for what I'm, currently talking about, but there will be a Q&A session for like any of the bigger or more elaborate questions later as well. So yeah, without further ado, I just want to dive in. I think, Kim, you need to stop sharing your screen so that I can share mine. All right, let's see. All right, just to confirm, can you see my screen right now?
We're good.
All right, good, perfect. Well, I want to start by talking about the resume piece. I know that that is something that many job seekers struggle with when they start out their job search. And what I really want to kind of cover are the three main topics around what matters in your resume, how to sell yourself effectively, and then most importantly, what is the deal with the applicant tracking system or the ATS, which if you haven't heard about is one of the most discussed topics on LinkedIn and other platforms. And most of it, quite frankly, is not necessarily true, but it's basically people selling the type of service that I also kind of work on with clients, meaning the resume revamp process, and sharing that, there's this automatic tool or this AI that automatically rejects all of your applications and how that is the biggest struggle inside your job search. So I'm going to show you what that actually looks like and, some of the things that you should keep in mind for the applicant tracking system as well. But let's talk about the applicant tracking system first and what that is. So the ATS is basically the software that recruiters are using when it comes down to finding and filtering out candidates and moving them into different parts of the process. So what you can do as a recruiter with the applicant tracking system is basically to post a job, share that on LinkedIn or Glassdoor or any of the other, different platforms for sourcing candidates. And then you'll basically start getting, when you go on LinkedIn and you hit the apply button, this is where your resume lands, is this kind of software. And then as a recruiter, here's the biggest or the most important step. Would be the system basically starts ranking candidates and filtering them by certain criteria, right? That criteria would typically be keywords that recruiters have basically selected, and kind of responsibilities or things that they are looking for in the ideal candidate for that particular job. Once that process happens, now the recruiter manually goes through the shortlisted candidates and starts saying, hey, this is someone that I want to interview. This is someone that I do not want to interview. And then you can even move them into like the scheduling process with the hiring managers, etc. all of that happens in this applicant tracking system. The biggest thing that I see job seekers worrying about is, okay, what are these magical keywords that I need to kind of basically have in my resume so that I kind of get passed through this stage of the process, the resume parsing, and don't get automatically rejected. I want to heavily emphasize that if there's anyone that has told you that your resume is automatically being rejected by this bot or like robot or kind of like the AI system, etc., that is not something that happens. Any time that you get rejected, it is because you have probably by the applicant tracking system put on the list of lower fit candidates, right? And hence, afterwards, a recruiter is still manually reviewing a resume and hitting the reject button. That is 99.9% of the times the case. The only any recruiter that you ask will share that with you. The only people that are telling you like, hey, you need this like magic sauce in your resume to pass through the system are people that are selling like resume revamp processes because they want you to think like, okay, you need this magic secret to kind of pass the system. So what does matter in your resume though is that it is very important that you have the right keywords and the right skills so that the ATS ranks you at the top or within one of the top pools of candidates that are a good match for the job. So maybe to give you an overview of what I mean by that, because I'm sure it's hard to imagine, is this is actually what the applicant tracking system looks like at Amazon, for example, right? This is the biggest tool or the one that most companies will use. And what you can see here is this is basically all of the candidates that have applied for a particular job that I had been recruiting for, right? You'll see here that the system does not basically automatically reject the candidates, but what it does it will tell me what type of experience match this person has. And then it filters the candidates into three pools, the strongest fit, the medium fit, and the lower fit, right? I still have to, as a recruiter, manually go through all of these resumes and basically, review and see, okay, who's a better fit or who do I want to move forward into like the actual interview stages, right? So what I'm trying to say, or what I want you to know, is that your objective of like revamping or having a good resume is you want to make sure that basically the system sees you as a very good fit. But at the same time, you need to make sure that once I press this button and open your resume, that I, as the human and the recruiter, basically see like, okay, I get it. This person is a good fit in 10 to 20 seconds, right? The reason why I'm emphasizing that is that there's a lot of like myths or stuff out there on LinkedIn of like, hey, you should just cram your resume with as much as you can, as many skills as possible. I even saw people that are copy pasting job descriptions and like pasting them into the resume in white font just to make sure that you cover all of these skills and keywords. That is not the approach to take, right? Because if your resume is just completely crammed and overwhelming, you might rank as a good fit, but as soon as I, as a human recruiter or hiring manager, open your resume, I will automatically be overwhelmed. I'm not going to read through everything and you're going to get rejected, right? So let's talk a little bit about formatting and I guess what your resume should and shouldn't look like. So preferably, what you would want to avoid is like the formattings that we have here on the left, especially if some of you have pictures inside your resume, definitely avoid that, right? Because many of these systems are set up for companies that don't want recruiters judging the resume by the picture, right? So hence you'll automatically be put in the lower pile of the process, right? And preferably you do not want to have a resume that has two columns like this and colors. Everything in terms of design, colors, etc., is distracting unless you're someone that is maybe in a specific industry or in a specific role where that stuff, like creative stuff, would matter. Then it might be a different story. But for the average tech executive, it will be very important for you to have something like this on the right that is a very clean and solid format in 2 pages, right? Doesn't matter how executive you are, even if you have 30 plus years of experience, your resume should not be longer than 2 pages, right? And here's the couple of things that matter. that you should keep in mind. You should have a very clean, crisp summary. You should have an experience section after that where you're highlighting in one sentence the scope of your, kind of experience, and then have something like this where you're kind of highlighting the keywords up front ahead of your bullets, and where you're going into 4, 5, 6 bullets under each experience that highlight what did you do, how did you do it, and what was the quantitative, qualitative outcome, achievement, or result, or the value that you basically provided in that role, right? So, like, to give you an example, saying something in your resume like that you managed the finance team could totally be, transformed into something like executive leadership, directed a team of 10 plus finance professionals in managing a 50 million investment portfolio, optimizing financial strategies, right? This is the how I did that, right? And then here's the outcome, right? So, having said that, I know that a lot of you might be thinking about, okay, fine, this is all great, but how do I identify, I guess, what matters for the jobs that I'm targeting, right? So, if you're someone that's out there on the job search and you are not planning to work with like someone like me or a professional or whatever, if you're trying to figure out what are some of the keywords and skills that matter, um, the first thing that you need to focus on is to identify what are the jobs that I'm going after, right? So, like, what are, 5 or 10 job descriptions that I'm really interested in that I would actually apply for, or that I've applied for slash interviewed for. And, if you're doing it by yourself, I would literally copy and paste those job descriptions, put them into an AI tool, like, for example, ChatGPT or whatever it is that you use, and do an analysis, right? Literally say, here's 5 or 10 job descriptions for jobs that I'm really interested in. Could you analyze what the 20 to 30 different keywords, skills, responsibilities are that all of these have in common that are being, highlighted, right? And it'll give you a very good sense of like, here's some of the keywords and skills that matter based on the jobs that you're targeting. Obviously, it's not going to be perfect, right? But it's going to give you a great first idea if you're doing it by yourself of like, okay, here are some of those keywords that you should be highlighting in bold that matter for the jobs that you're targeting, right? So I'm just going to do a quick pause here. Any questions in the chat, Kim? I can't see
Yep.
the chat. Any questions or?
I was just going to say so I think you actually just answered Jonathan Seats and Ahmad's question. But Jonathan, do you want to just clarify? Did you get your question answered?
Not quite, but thanks for asking. I mean, part of the challenge is like you're saying, Chris. You've got five job descriptions in front of you that you're interested in, and you want to sort of like, do you need to go into each one of those and specifically tailor to, because each job description has different keywords, right? Each company has different keywords, and is the ATS going to be smart enough to go like, actually, this like these three phrases are pretty close, and do a close enough matching in that way?
Okay, good point. Jonathan, I don't know specifically, for example, your background, but for the average job seeker, like typically you will have different types of jobs that you're going after. Meaning, let's say that you're a head of finance and you've gone from director of finance to head of finance, then you were CFO. Now the jobs that you're targeting are CFO jobs. Typically, you will have one resume that will match for most of the jobs that you're applying for. If you're somebody that has a little bit of like a um, more of a diverse background, and there might be 2 or 3 different types of jobs that you are, applying for in terms of that are pretty similar to each other. Maybe in that case, you would have 2 or 3 different resume versions that you're using for each individual application. It should not be the case, though, that you're using or that you're spending like an hour plus for every single application optimizing your resume, right? So I don't know, obviously, your specific background, but typically, like if you have 2 or 3 different versions, that should be fine for the applicant tracking system to understand, like, okay, this person is a good fit for this job, right? So there's no need for you
Right.
to like spend hours optimizing your resume for every single application, right?
Okay, so I'm looking for product executive roles, and depending on sector, and also like level, so between director and VP and CPO,
Mhm.
like they look for different types of things. And so sounds like what you're saying is like I should have like three resumes to sort of fit that kind of vertical stack should
Yeah.
be sufficient, even if
And
one's fintech or SaaS or
yeah,
whatever.
totally. And by the way, okay, this is a bit of a broader discussion, but by the way, you should not be having the approach of like I'm targeting different, like five, six, seven different industries and directions, right? That is the worst approach that you can take for anyone that is out there. Typically, you want to get very concrete on here's the two or three different industries, position types, levels, etc., that I'm targeting, and I'm going aggressively after those, right? Because like also your networking strategy, for example, would be dependent on that, right? Meaning if I'm saying like, hey, I'm going to target these two or three industries, here's my top 50 companies. Now I'm going after the recruiters for each of these companies. I'm not going to be able to do that, or my approach is going to be way less effective if I just have, hey, I can do anything. I'm going into 10 directions, right? I can come back to that in the later Q&A because it's a bit of a longer discussion, but I hope that helps. I'm not sure if you had any other questions in the chat, Kim, already that are.
We do. So
Okay,
sorry,
go ahead.
Jonathan, forgive me. I will move us forward. So Ginny has a question. What's the best way to show promotions and lateral moves within the same company? That's a
Oh, great point. Look, typically, depending on how many promotions, etc., you have, right? A good way to show that, I'm just going to use an example, would be, for example, like this, right? Where you have the company listed, then you have the job title number one, then you have job title number two, separate that and break it out and list the separate experiences that you had in each job, right? That would be typically the way to go about it. If you've had four, five, six different promotions within one company, right? You don't need to show every single promotion. Maybe you consolidate and have like, two jobs be one, right? And just like write it out like that. Again, this is very individual, so not sure I'll be able to, dive deeper into that. But yeah, that would be the rough structure for that.
And then we also have another question. Where again do you put the directed a team of 10 finance professionals, into the resume?
Oh, sorry. This was an example from a before, right? So this was before was managed the finance team, and I just showed here the directed. That would be like the better bullet, right? So this would be, for example, like one of the resume bullets that you could have here. Instead of saying like, oh, I managed the finance team, like I was just showing like this would be the before and after of transforming your bullets from something that is just describing a responsibility, right? Which is this, into here's what I did, here's how, and here's some quantitative outcomes or metrics slash achievements, right? Um, if that makes
Perfect.
sense. I'm
And
going to
then
try to move on, Kim. I'm sorry,
good.
and answer the rest of the questions later because I want to make sure that we manage to go through also the LinkedIn piece. So look, probably for most of the people that are on this particular call, the way that you're going to get hired is typically there's only going to be two ways. It is going to be very unlikely if you're an executive that you're going to be hired by just applying for a job cold and landing it, right? I would say the likelihood of that is 20%. The other 80% is split into either networking, so like getting a referral, knowing someone tapping you on the shoulder for a job, or somebody reaching out to you. In this market, most of the times companies will hire the executive recruiter or headhunter and have them find candidates instead of them posting jobs and getting 500 applications within like one day, right? Because it's much more, unfortunately, expensive for the company to hire somebody to deal with like going through all of those applications and managing the process than a recruiter finding candidates, 5 or 10 candidates, presenting those and having like the interview stages, right? So I just want to show you the way that process works. So like if you're a recruiter or a headhunter, you're actually using the separate platform of LinkedIn called LinkedIn Recruiter, which is a software where I can basically go in and say, I'm looking for a head of marketing, right? And now I can start an AI assisted search and I'll see who's out there on the market. Right. So now you'll see there's 3 million plus people that are head of marketing related in the States that are currently open to work. So my first step as a recruiter would be to say, hey, I'm just looking for someone that's eligible to work in New York because that's where like our job is, for example, based out of. And now my next step is going to be to actually say, let me start filtering out by certain skills and keywords, because like even though my search has been trimmed down, there's still a lot of people out there. So I might now say, I'm just looking for someone that has a background in X, Y, and Z, or I'm just looking for someone that has experience of managing teams of 100 plus. I'm just looking for someone that has certain hard skills, soft skills, whatever those are. I would put in my keywords and skills, and then I'm going to hit open to work. And then the people that show up for me on pages 1 and 2 are typically the ones that get that message from me of like, hey, Kim, I saw that you're currently open to work. Your background sounds really interesting. I have job X. Do you want to have a first interview? Right. So the reason why I'm just sharing that, I guess, is that it's very important for you to be aware of this as the job seeker, right? Because there's a lot of different things that matter inside your profile that can influence, like if you show up on pages 1 and 2, which are the only candidates that actually get a message, right? Because I'm not going to go, it's like a Google search. I'm never, when are you ever like buying a product, right? Or selecting a service and going to page 10 on Google, right? Never. So what I wanted to kind of just dive in a little bit, I'm just going to use an example from one of my clients. So if you go into this profile, you'll see LinkedIn is actually really great, right? Because it gives you the option, for example, up here to integrate and embed some of those keywords, right? Inside your about section, you can actually embed your top 5 skills, right? Inside your individual experiences, you can also embed your keywords like that up front in your bullets, right? To impact the algorithm. And you can actually work on the skills that you leveraged in that particular role, right? These are very, very important things that you should optimize so that on the back end, if I as a recruiter am searching, that you're showing up in my search, right? So coming back, I think to like what we also discussed a little bit briefly in the resume portion. This is exactly why it's very important for you to do that analysis and like get an understanding of like what are the keywords and the skills that matter for the jobs I'm targeting, and then not just weave that into your resume, but especially optimize your LinkedIn profile so that you are showing up for recruiters and getting more of those like inbound, I guess, leads, right? So that there's more people reaching out to you for jobs that are not publicly posted and jobs that you might otherwise, never get a chance to interview for, right? So if I'd be out on the market, the first thing that I would, suggest that you do is to really get an understanding of what are the skills, keywords, responsibilities, etc., that matter for the jobs I'm targeting, and then optimize your resume and your LinkedIn for both of that, right? And I'm sure that there's some questions, so I'm just going to pause briefly. Any questions, Kim, or?
Yeah, just a clarification, it sounds like from Ahmad, was the example of a LinkedIn profile that you showed us, the client, one that you optimized?
Yeah, this is a former client of mine, right? So, yes, if you want to use that as a template, or if you want to go back into that and just have a look into it, or maybe what might also be easier for anyone, if you go into my website, any of the client reviews that you'll find on here as well, they're all also connected, like their LinkedIn profiles are there, right? So feel free to browse through. Maybe you'll find someone that is more specific or similar to your background. Feel free to go through and have a look right into the LinkedIn profiles. All of those are, obviously done by me, right? So, yeah.
Thanks, Chris. We're good.
We're good. Okay. One thing that I want to mention on this kind of topic is if you're somebody that has been laid off or that has left their previous job, one thing that you should definitely keep in mind is recruiters will often up here search for job titles, right? So if I'm looking for a head of marketing, I will typically search for head of marketing, director of marketing, etc. Notice that for me, this says current or past, right? For the average recruiter, this will say current, right? Meaning their search will be for somebody that is currently a head of marketing, and it will only show people that are marked as head of marketing, right? So if I were to be going into my profile and change like that I've just left my role, right? I would no longer be showing up in this search. So my advice to anyone that is like, I don't know if there's any people in Sidebar that are laid off or left their jobs, etc. My advice would be, as long as you can drag out, the change of your profile, keep it marked as present in your resume. Obviously, you can be, you have to have the right date. You're never going to run into an issue, even if a recruiter were to say like, hey, I noticed on your LinkedIn you're marked as present, but your resume says end date X. What's the deal? You can always say like, hey, I'm not really that active on LinkedIn. I must have not changed it, right? But all the dates in my resume are the accurate ones, just so that you show up inside these searches, right? So that would be definitely, things to keep in mind when it comes down to like LinkedIn, and just optimizing your profile. I want to talk a little bit about the networking piece, because I'm sure that that's something that many of you are working on. Um, and I want to give like two, I guess, practical things that you can start with today. Number one, if you are actively searching for a job, my biggest suggestion would be that you find and create a list of recruiting firms. So for my clients, I will typically create a list of 20 to 30 executive recruiting and headhunting firms that match your background, right? And then I would have, you go in and basically go into all of these pages and become one of their candidates / submit your resume. What happens a lot right now is that a company will hire these guys and say like, hey, we're looking for a head of sales. Can you find us 5 to 10 candidates? If you're a recruiter working inside this company, the first thing that you do is to check the system and see, is there anyone that we have on file that might be a match before ever going out and searching, or before ever posting the job, right? So I would want to make sure, if I, be on the job market, that the 20 to 30 recruiting and headhunting firms that matter for me and my background and industry and what I'm looking for, that I go into all of them and basically submit my resume and become one of their candidates, so that they have me on file, right? Again, if you're somebody that isn't doing this with like a professional or whatever, I don't know, maybe you can do like a Google search, right? That is like recruiting firms, New York, industry X, or you could again like use, for example, even AI to like get inspired and say, hey, what are the 20 recruiting firms that heavily recruit for jobs X in location Y, and see if you can find any recruiting firms like that, right? I mean, I personally do this, like by my knowledge and experience of knowing, okay, here's the recruiting firms I know that recruit for companies X, Y, and Z. That will matter for Kim, for example, right? So, but you can also kind of at least try to do it by yourself, at least to find some of the major ones that will be relevant for you, right? That would definitely be my first step once I have the resume and LinkedIn optimized. The second piece that I would definitely suggest that you do, if you are starting with the process of, kind of the job search, my first thing that I would always suggest that you do is get an overview of who am I actually currently connected to, right? So if you go onto your LinkedIn, onto me, and settings and privacy, and if you now press data privacy here on the left, and if you now get a copy of your data here, you can actually download this, right? And it'll give you the raw data of all of your information on your profile. I typically, for my clients, will create like a spreadsheet like this, right? Where I will now have an overview of, here's everyone that you're connected to, and let's filter it out by company name, that where they work, and by the job titles they have, right? And then after that, my next step would be to say, let me now create two buckets out of this. One of them should be recruiters, talent acquisition, HR, headhunter, anyone basically in that space. And the second bucket should be potential peers, hiring managers, executives that will be relevant for you to network with, right? And once I have that, every single week, I should be reaching out to 5 to 10 people from these buckets, with the approach of like, hey, I noticed that you're doing X, Y, and Z. And that sounds really interesting. I'd love to have a first introductory networking conversation with you if you're open to it. or there will be people that you're probably connected to but haven't spoken to in a really long time, etc. Right? The conversion ratio here will be 10 to 20%, right? So like if you're sending out 10 messages, expect to have 1 to 3 networking calls result out of that, right? Preferably, you're not sending the messages of, hey, I'd love to catch up. I'm on the market. Can you help me? Right? Preferably make it mutually beneficial, right? Of like, hey, I see that you're doing X, Y, and Z. That sounds really interesting. I'd love to find out more about that from you. Would you be open to hopping on a call? Sounds much better than like, hey, I'm searching for a job. Can you help? Right? So people love to talk to you if you make it about them versus just yourself, right? That's just like our nature. But I would start with really getting an overview of who you are connected with where, and this would be your starting point once you filter it out in those 2 buckets that I mentioned, in terms of also starting the networking process, right? So I think I guess just to like go back and summarize a little bit, right? I would really make sure that you start with the process of getting a very concrete overview of the keywords and the things that matter for the jobs you're targeting. Step 2 would be create the right materials, right? The resume, the LinkedIn, and also the cover letter, by the way. It's a good, very common question. One of the things that the ATS does is it will value candidates or push candidates who submit a cover letter to the top, right? So for all of your applications, my suggestion would be make sure that you are always going in and submitting a cover letter. 90% of the times it won't get read, but it will push you to the top. And also for many recruiters, if I have 25 applications and I see that 2 of those submitted a cover letter, I would typically start reading through those first because I think that they're probably more interested / better applicants, right? Doesn't mean I'm going to actually read through the cover letter, but that's just how many recruiters will think, right? Which makes sense, right? And then for every single application that you do, I want to make sure that you're really being strategic and like following up with the right people, right? So what I mean by that is, first of all, never use LinkedIn Easy Apply. Always apply directly through the company page. Right now, there's a heavy push that there's all of these different softwares you can use to basically mass apply to jobs. So many recruiters will not review LinkedIn Easy Apply because there's a lot of spam there. They will just review the folks that apply directly through the company page, right? So that would be point 1. And then point 2 is make sure that you're finding someone in that company that you can follow up with, right? So one of the functions, for example, you'll see that there's jobs like this one where there is somebody listed as a hiring team. There it's easy. Obviously, you're going to go in and contact this person. But for people that are, or for jobs where there's nobody that is listed underneath the job like this one, it does not end there, right? Make sure that you, for example, copy the job title, right? And if you go into LinkedIn, that you paste this into the browser. And if you type "and hiring," if you filter out by posts, you'll be able to see anyone that has basically posted something like this, like, hey, I'm hiring a head of sales, etc. Right? I would scroll through here and see, can I find that particular, recruiter or hiring manager that may not be listed underneath this job, but that may have posted about the job and said like, hey, my team is hiring, etc. You have a massive leg up if you find that person and reach out to them and follow up on your application, right? Because like most of the job seekers right now, the struggle is not necessarily the interview stage. It's really just getting the traction and getting into the interview stage, right? And like obviously a big piece of that is getting the cold inbound, inbound messages from recruiters by having the right profile there, but also when you apply, making sure that you're taking the right steps and following up with the right people in kind of and using like LinkedIn as your tool for that, right? So like here, for example, I didn't find that job, right? So maybe my next step would be to say, let me try Campfire and hiring, right? That would be my next step, to see, okay, can I find this particular job like that? I'm not going to waste time and go through the process, right? Sometimes I won't find anything, but it's always worth doing this, right? And trying to find someone, right? Um, Obviously, AI is going to play a big role inside your job search as well, right? So I wanted to just briefly cover that. I would not recommend that anyone uses AI for their application materials, right? So I can't tell you how many times I've had recruiters or candidates that I've worked with where the recruiter feedback was literally like, hey, we know that you completed this assignment or that your resume is AI generated, we don't appreciate that. Done, right? Whatever your opinion is about AI, right? I mean, I, for example, think that it's great, right? But I don't think that it is super great for the resume and the LinkedIn process, unfortunately. And especially if you're somebody that is not able to kind of make it sound more human or personal, right? Like, don't do that, right? Because resume or recruiters can tell because they see hundreds of resumes a day. If your resume is just like an AI generated, very simple resume. So my suggestion would be for the AI usage, heavily use it for interviews. That's where you really get a lot of value out of it. Specifically, for example, let's just say that you have an interview with Amazon for job X. I would always instantly take the job description and copy and paste that into a tool. I would take the person's LinkedIn that I'm talking to and paste it in, and then say, hey, here's my resume, here's the job I'm interviewing for, here's the person I'm interviewing with, here are all the details. Can you tell me what the top 6 areas are that are probably going to be covered that I should be focused on? What are some of the transferable skills that I should highlight for this particular interview? What are the top 10 questions that I can expect, etc. Right? These are things where AI can definitely be a great source for you to like brainstorm and help you prep, right? So I think that would be definitely something that is very helpful for the interview stages, and then even maybe with the thank you notes and all of that stuff. Obviously, always make sure that you add like that prompt around like make it personal or human sounding, etc., so that it doesn't sound, like an AI generated thank you note and all of that stuff. But those would be, I think, the core areas that I wanted to mainly share slash cover. I know that it was a lot, so I'm happy that we're recording. And anyone that obviously wants to reach out to me, even if it's not in a formal way to like engage with the service or whatever, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I try to post, useful and free content there every day. Plus, if you have any questions or anyone that I can connect you to in my network, I'm always more than happy to do that as well. So I hope that this was helpful and makes sense, and I'm open and happy to answer any questions. Thank you so much.
Amazing, Chris. And I think this has given us 20 minutes to ask a bunch of questions, which I have been saving from
Okay.
the chat. So perhaps we go back to that, unless we want to open up to anybody to just voice a question now.
Sure. Whatever works for you guys in terms of the format is good.
You know what? I'll go back to some of the chat questions. So
All
we
right.
had Kara in the resume description or the resume advice that you were giving us. She's played around with a few resume AI tools that help edit the core resume for specific jobs. Are there any AI tools you've tried that you strongly recommend? Given your don't use AI for resumes, help us understand.
Okay. So you're talking about using AI to build the resume from scratch, or what is the sorry, I wasn't quite sure about the question there.
Let me rephrase that. It sounds like, or Kara, if you're still on, why don't you
Yeah, I
just
can jump in. They were just so I built like a core, like you said, a core, and then like a couple versions, like 2 or 3 versions for the slightly different positions. But there are tools, like I was just searching them, and there's a bunch that you like upload that and the job description, and it like tweaks it slightly to match like that specific job.
Right.
And so I didn't know if there were like tools that you're like, oh, this one works pretty well, or just use ChatGPT, or don't do it at all. Obviously,
Okay.
then you have to still like go through it and make
Got you.
sure you like it. But
I know what tools you're talking about. You're talking about like Teal and that type of stuff, right? I mean, look, I would say you can use, for example, a tool like Teal, or you can use ChatGPT. It doesn't make a big difference. I would be very careful with it, and I would make sure that you just, obviously you can use it for brainstorming, etc. But to be honest with you, I think that the best thing that you can probably do is to paste the job description and paste your resume into, for example, ChatGPT and say, hey, what are some of the things that I could do better slash improve to be a better candidate for this job in my resume, right? And then just read through the notes it gives you and then by yourself see, okay, what do I want to implement and what not, right? But
Yeah, makes
stay
sense.
away from like anything that is like automatically submit, like what I was more talking about as well is there's all of these tools where it will actually automatically submit the application for you, right? Or
Mm,
tools that will, for example, mass email recruiters or hiring managers that are supposedly relevant for you with like AI generated messages, like all of that, anything that is like quantity versus quality in your job search is bad. If
for
that,
sure. Yeah, it makes sense.
so yeah, good question.
Yeah.
And for another resume question, we had, and forgive me if I'm pronouncing this incorrectly, sounds like Baish had asked a question about recommending listing skills on the resume about your recommendation around listing skills on the resume directly.
um, Meaning listing the like hard skills that you have on like as a separate section, I assume, right?
The titles that you had shown us on the bullets seem to be a smart way of doing that. Vaish, do you want to come off mute and just make sure I'm saying this correctly?
Yes, thank you, Kim. Chris, exactly that. I really loved how you've used the bolded keywords here, which I think also stand in for skills. But do you also recommend having a separate section of just the hard skills spelled out on the resume?
Yeah, so meaning like basically in between the summary and above here to have that. Look, no, I don't recommend that, but it depends on industry. If you're someone that uses, like if you're someone that is very technical, like a software developer or whatever, maybe you might want to have that, right? If you're the average executive that is not like in the technical space, right? Like, really like has a job where certain like tools that you need are very important. You don't need to do that, right? Anymore, right? This is actually new. But you don't need to do that. It's plenty if you embed it, and like the skill section is distracting and unnecessary for you to have. Because what matters to me as the recruiter, to be honest with you, is really the experiences and what you've done in each role, right? And does that align with what I'm looking for, right?
Agreed. Got that. Got that. I was wondering for the ATS that automatically looks at this and does an experience match and then a skills match. Will it matter? But I really like what you're suggesting here,
Yeah, no,
embedding it.
yeah, totally. I mean, it's not going to matter and it's not going to make yeah, a different, right? A difference. So yeah, no, totally. Anything else or any other questions, Kim, that you have?
You have a lot of them. So
Okay, got
there
you.
was a whole group of questions on job dates within LinkedIn as you're going through that strategy. We've got Jonathan, Akel, Teresa, and Julia that had asked some questions. So Jonathan, do you want to go first?
Sure, it's yeah, it's really quick. Basically, the part where you're using the talent filtering part, and if you go through a layoff, you were suggesting leave it as present,
Mhm.
so it would show up in the listing as current and present. Um, like what's a reasonable amount of time to leave it as present after you get laid off? Because you don't want to seem dishonest. Like when they look at your resume, and go, "Oh, that was like 2 years ago."
Totally. Good point. Look,
We want to show up.
yeah, no, totally. Anything within like 5 to 6 months is fine. Anything above that is going to be a bit of a stretch, right? So like if you're kind of in that 5 to 6 months time frame, try to drag that out as long as you can. If you're someone that, I don't know, for example, is still on payroll for 2 months after you left the job, right? Consider that year's end date and then tack 5 months onto that. And then, obviously after that, it becomes a bit much, right? But so yeah, that would be, I mean, preferably you land a job within that time frame, right? But if you haven't, then unfortunately, you are, as you said, going to have to change it because it becomes a bit obvious that you're stretching it, right? So,
Sure.
yeah.
So I know so many people who have been unemployed for like over a year, 2 years, like it's crazy right now. And
Yeah.
so what you just said sort of rings true and kind of what I've done. Do you have any
Right.
other strategies or recommendations on how to show up in that case, even if
Yeah.
if you've been you know what I mean?
Totally. I mean, look at that point. I mean, the only thing that would matter is kind of like the what you can influence is the sections with like the keywords, the skills, and all of that stuff that I walked through, like in the headline and in the about section and the experiences. That's the stuff that would matter to really make sure that you are showing up in the searches, right? But
Mhm.
I mean, if you're out there, I don't know how long you've been out there, right? But if you're out there for a long time, then like, yeah, unfortunately, at some point you're going to have to close, the job that you have. One thing that I will often do with, for example, some clients is to say, okay, let's add a job. Like if you're someone that's, for example, doing fractional work or consulting or something, let's add a new job into your experience after the one that you've left, like the professional one that you've left, and say like Chief Operating Officer in brackets consulting, and then have that be your present so that you're still showing up if someone's searching for that in their search. But I don't know, obviously, if that's feasible for you, if you're like consulting or doing any type of work like that, right? But that would be my advice.
Right. Um, Sort of a tag onto that. Sorry, I don't want to take over this, but like, what do you have any thoughts on? There's some people who have used like in LinkedIn. There's these sort of virtual companies like Career Break or Sabbatical, like
Oh,
and under those they go like, I've been working on this, I've been working on this, like training and so
look,
forth.
I would avoid that, right? Because that is gonna like saying like career break or travel or whatever, that's gonna harm you in the way that now you're not showing up in the search as like what was your most recent industry or job title at all, because it's like
All right.
travel break, right? So I would just keep what you have held or the job you've held before, right? If possible.
All right. Thanks.
Yep, no problem.
I'm going to move us forward. Achel, forgive me. I know you asked a question. It sounds like we also answered. I'll come back to you for a new question. Teresa Abraham.
Hey, Chris, this question's about location. So if you scroll to the top, you mentioned how recruiters are constantly going to put a specific city. What if you left that just as United States because you're open to moving, so you're not listing a specific city? Would that hurt you as a candidate when a recruiter is not searching by United States and they're looking for specific cities?
Good point. Look, what actually, and this is something that I missed in my presentation, so I'm happy you bring it up, is there's this open to work function, right? What I was showing where like you as a recruiter select like New York, what that is actually picking up is not this location that you have in here, but it is picking up um, oh yeah, this is it. So what it's picking up is like here, what have you pressed as like what you're open to work for, right? The reason why I'm happy you bring this up is that a lot of job seekers will actually have it set up like if I'm based in Boston and I'm looking for a job in Boston, I will have it set up like that. And a lot of job seekers will actually here in the remote section not select United States, right? So if you're someone that's based anywhere in the States and you're looking for a job, make sure that you select remote and that you not just select your own city, but also the United States as a whole. Because if I might be, based in Boston, but there's a remote, job that I can have somewhere in Chicago, I would now not be show I would not show up in the recruiter search because this is the section that matters, right? So to answer your question, I don't know where you're based, Teresa. Where are you based?
I'm based out of the Midwest in Indiana, but I'm actually looking for positions all over. But you answered my question because that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm
Okay,
doing open
great.
to and being very specific through the cities. Yeah, and adding United States. So,
Okay,
yep.
great. Yeah. Okay, so you're all set. All right.
Thank you.
Good.
Awesome. Julia Chandler. Julia, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I think you answered most of it because I've been out of work for 2 years and I've kept my current company and I know it's been way too long, but I kept it
Okay,
for
gotcha.
that same reason. But I have been doing fractional work, so I will add that now. I just
Okay,
didn't want
great.
to fall off
Gotcha,
because
gotcha.
I've still been getting recruiters because of that. And I tell them, once they call, and I've still been going forward in the interview
Got it.
process, but so it's okay now to put the fractional work and just put
Yeah,
COO, VP of operations, and that will still put me at the top, I guess,
totally. Yeah,
hopefully.
totally. Totally. Yeah.
Okay. All right,
Okay, got
thanks.
it.
Okay.
Yeah, no worries.
And then Michael Rosenthal, you've got a couple of questions. So if you want to ask both.
Sure, thanks. I think most of them have been answered, but the one that still is outstanding is just how do you think about LinkedIn content creation and how that helps or doesn't help when with recruiters and or prospective employers.
Okay, good. Yeah, no, great point. I get this question all the time, actually. Look, LinkedIn, or there's two sides of LinkedIn, right? Number one is the content creation side and like sharing your insights, sharing your knowledge, etc., which is more related to like branding, right? And then the second piece is like showing up inside recruiter searches and making sure that your profile is optimized so that you get inbound messages from recruiters, which is what we discussed, right? I would heavily, or I would not encourage you to spend a lot of time on creating content on LinkedIn or like posting on LinkedIn, because the likelihood that somebody is going to reach out to you at your probably executive level, right? And say like, hey, Michael, I saw your post and that is really great. I want to hire you, is extremely low. Your energy and time would much better be invested into like networking, finding new people, reaching out to people, finding new jobs, etc., going to events or whatever it is, right? So I would not encourage you to do that. The process, I guess, for the like, for the content creation, to be honest with you, is only valuable for somebody that is like self-employed or doing something like what I do, right? Where it's like, I want to show my audience that I know my shit and that I know what I'm doing. Hence, I'm posting, right? Because like that way, people, will see like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. I want to work with him, right? For somebody that is looking for a full-time job, there's no value other than if you're saying, I want to build my brand and I want to make sure that others that see me see like, okay, this guy is executive. It's a really long-term game for you to get some value out of posting content as a full-time professional, right? So like I don't know if you're searching for a new job, right? But if you're searching for a new job, I would say invest the energy in networking and applications versus posting.
Great, thank you. Do you mind if I ask a quick second one?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I don't want to, I know there's a lot of folks and we don't have a lot of time left. I just want to go back to the AI generated resume. And not to nitpick, but I mean, I will use different AI tools to help me generate bullets and like put together like what are the best, I put in the examples and they kind of rewrite them and kind of reframe them for me. And then
Okay.
I, put that into my own formatted resume. Is that okay? Or is it just the resumes that are fully 100% just spit out and copied as a PDF from
Right.
AI that are a problem? Or is it?
Look, that sounds totally fine to me, Michael. The
Okay.
reason why is that it sounds to me like you're doing the thinking behind this and like you're just using it for brainstorm, which is
Right.
fine. I mean,
Okay.
it's like, think about it as if, if you email me, right, and I email you back and there's all of these EM dashes and it looks exactly like a ChatGPT, reply, probably you're not going to be impressed, right? But if I use it to brainstorm my reply to you and then write it in my, tweak it and write it in my own words, that's fine, right? So that's the same with the resume, right?
Thank you, Michael, for